This podcast is for general information only. It is not intended as a substitute for general healthcare services. If you have medical conditions, you need to see your doctor. Use of this information is at the user's own risk. Welcome to FitRx with Dr. Greg Dennis. Join me as we challenge the standard sick model of healthcare. This is your source for everything health, wellness, prevention, fitness, biohacking, and more. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of FitRx. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Dennis. If you will forgive my voice, it's fall in Oklahoma. Allergies are crazy for me, and I've had a lot of drainage, and I'm about to lose it. But I told my guests we're going to try to get through this episode. I'm sure we will. So you have heard me here before. Obviously, I talk a lot about low carb, other types of nutrition. You have heard me talk about specifically the carnivore diet before, but it's been a little while since we've discussed that. And any time that I find somebody that does that, especially a doctor in the medical profession, I kind of jump on that opportunity to just pick their brain a little. And so somebody recommended this, my next guest, and I can't remember who it was, but you probably are listening out there, so thank you. But my guest today is Dr. Lisa Wiedeman. She is an optometrist up in New Jersey. She is otherwise known as the Carnivore Doctor, which is what her website is, and I'll share that later in the podcast. But she has been doing this type of lifestyle for 14 years, and so she's very experienced in this. And so, gosh, she's probably one of the original ones, even before it was kind of cool. And so just excited to kind of pick her brain about this. And so, yeah, we're just going to hear about her story, how she got into this style of eating, and learn a little bit more about it. If you are new to the carnivore diet, if you have not heard my previous podcast, then I think you're going to be very excited to hear about just the potential benefits of this style of eating. So Dr. Wiedeman, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Dennis. I'm thrilled to be here because I have such a passion to help educate, inform, inspire, and motivate anybody who's willing to have an open mind to this type of thing, because I know it seems pretty dramatic, pretty drastic, pretty unusual compared to the standard American diet. So I have, just through all of my years of being in this, and I do group coaching and one-on-one coaching, just really because so many reach out, and it was my way of saying, okay, let me dedicate time to this, because I am in the, I really have such a benefit in that I found it so long ago. And back when I found it, I was angry I hadn't learned about it, heard about it, and found it many years prior, because my history is of suffering, and really kind of unbeknownst to me at the time, as I went through life. I'm 58 right now, but I didn't realize that I had a sugar, carb, processed food addiction. Many don't realize that really truly is an addiction, and to certain extents with different people. But I suffered binge eating disorders, and just full on couldn't help myself, couldn't figure out why I couldn't control it. And it was a 30-year misery for me. And I looked at it like, wow, I'm a smart woman. I've got a lot going for me. Why can I not figure this out? And I had tried all sorts of things through the years, because weight was always an issue. My parents are obese. My brother's obese. I was chubby-ish as a kid until I hit about 14, which was when the whole eating disorders started. And it became really a passion of mine once I did figure this out, because I went through the cabbage soup diet. I went through, all sorts of anything and everything that most of us go through to try to get weight off, keep weight off. And then I started figuring out through a lot of research and reading all about paleo. And I read a book called The Schwarzbein Principle and Neanderthal. And it was starting to click and connect with me that these things were saying you got to not eat sugar and flour. So that was the start of it for me. This was prior to finding the carnivore, which back then we called zero carb. But it was a very important period of time for me where I thought, wow, if I eliminate the sugar and the flour, I'm doing much better. But then what would happen is I'm right back in the ditch and couldn't really figure out why. Then there's Atkins. And then there was trying to think of all sorts of different things in between, but a lot of research and internet surfing, thank goodness back then. This was before Facebook and Instagram. YouTube, I think, had started just prior to this, but I found a group called Zeroing In on Health, run by Charles Washington. And it was a group of people who had figured out, they were on a forum, a low carb forum, and figured out that doing the induction phase of Atkins, which is I don't think I actually read the entire book and did it in its entirety, but basically, it's low carb, but the induction phase, the first 2 weeks, is essentially carnivore. You're eating meat, bacon, butter, eggs. And this group of people said, wow, we did so great on it. Why do we have to stop? Why do we have to climb the carb ladder? And then it came to thinking about all the people that say, oh, yeah, I tried that Atkins thing and did great. I lost lots of weight, but I put it back on. Well, that's because people go back thinking they're done with the diet and they're going back to the way they ate, not realizing that really we want to get back to our addictive foods. We want to get back to pizza and ice cream and chocolate and chips and anything and everything that you really used as comfort for those of us who eat, and there's many of us who eat for emotional reasons and not just truly out of hunger as we should. And yeah, so finding that group was the turning point for me. It was March 9th, 2009. I can tell you to the day. And I thought, all right, these people are crazy. What do you mean? I'm just going to eat basically meat, seafood, eggs, and dairy, and anything that came from an animal. And I was very attentive when I went onto this little forum that Charles Washington formed, because I got kicked off of the low carb one. And there was women in there who were talking about their sugar addiction and food addiction and binging and how this resolved it. So I said, well, I'm jumping in. I don't know if this is healthy. I'm jumping in and I'm going to start doing my research. And yeah, then people were sharing the Fat of the Land, Not by Bread Alone, the writings of Owsley Stanley, who had been doing this for about 40 years at that point. And I thought, wow, as I'm really talking with these people and reading and understanding, I said, and myself feeling better, because my problem back on paleo, I would be cleaning strawberries for my kids and every other one would go in my mouth. Well, strawberries are paleo, but guess what? They're sweet and they drive the cravings, and it continued my issues. So yeah, it became, I'm going to say, miraculous for me. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops. I wanted to, because then all these other people in there from all different walks of life, some were saying this resolved my arthritis. This got rid of my psoriasis. This got rid of my Crohn's and IBS. This got rid of my, you name it, XYZ, hypertension, diabetes, bipolar. There was somebody in there who resolved themselves, anxiety, depression. I thought, holy smokes, this is pretty unbelievable. And then it was the thought of, well, this is the way man was intended to eat all along. And the more I did it, the better I felt, the more I I really embraced the fact that what I was doing was right, that my body was not going to lead me astray by eating the most nutrient dense foods available. And then, of course, the studies kept, we had to keep looking into, well, why can we be healthy and not eat fruit and vegetable like we're brainwashed to think we have to do? And all the information was coming out about that. And yeah, eventually I just kind of settled into life and just was going about what I was doing and kind of stayed quiet about it because I realized really quickly nobody really wants to hear about this really crazy, wacky thing that I'm doing. And I felt like I was flying my freak flag. And I just got quiet about it because, heck, I don't care what anybody else eats. You shouldn't care what I eat. And onward I went until the point where I was kind of scrolling through whatever, it's probably Instagram, and I saw it was probably maybe Sean Baker, who had been on Joe Rogan. And I read in the comments, people like, well, that's all well and good, but how about 5 years from now when you have a heart attack? This is not sustainable. You can't do this long term. So I just kind of felt like I needed to raise my hand and say, wait a minute, here I am. Yes, this is sustainable. And yes, it's healthy.
Hmm. Well, let me go back if I could. So, was your primary motivation just for weight loss, or did you have other, health issues that you were trying to take care of?
Yeah, fortunately for me, my destructive 30-year history of what I was doing, binging, and that really, fortunately for me, didn't end up yet at that point in diabetes or any other severe health issues. I was fortunate. I guess caught it at 44, and it was pretty much I'd been doing it since 14 years old. And yeah, for me, it was monumental though. I was in such a deep hole of distraught, just knowing that eventually I was going to kill myself with this. And so that was my big, huge why. I say people who come to this have to have their significant why, or else you don't typically look into giving up your bread, your pasta, your rice, and everything else.
Yeah. So as you were looking at this, and I guess, like I said, you realized your sugar addiction, you realized you wanted to lose some weight, and you're a medical professional, and I guess you were at that time as well, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you're, maybe looking at a lifestyle change, and you came across this as a medical professional, and as you mentioned, like, this is contrary to everything that's taught, in kind of standard healthcare. I mean, what were your thoughts? Were you like, okay, yeah, this is nuts? I mean, what made you? I mean, you kind of talked about it, but what made you decide, hey, this is good. I think it may be healthy. What made you make that jump?
Yeah, well, it was an instantaneous jump. As soon as I laid my eyes on the forums um, in that website that where these women were saying they were resolved and just totally relieved of cravings and their addictive behavior. And at that point, you know what? Sounds crazy, but I didn't care what it took. I wanted out of that misery that, like I said, I really felt was eventually going to kill me. And so it was a quick jump. I just jumped off the cliff and said, here I go. But at that moment of saying, you know what, I'm going to go on the testimony, the anecdotal evidence of these two women that were in there writing, and maybe I'm going to be three. And yeah, my N equals one experiment. I just was so, but of course, I don't take my health lightly. And I thought, well, gosh, I thought if this is going to resolve this problem, but then cause a whole other host of problems with either the whole cholesterol issue and all that with the fatty red meat and what do you think you're doing, not getting all the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients from the fruits and the vegetables? But what happened is, as I felt better and better and was going right along with more and more people coming into this and resolving themselves of all sorts of ills, I thought, this is pretty powerful. There's something to this. And then we would share different bits of information about how the vitamins and minerals that are in vegetables are really not as bioavailable as they are in meat and organs. And that there's a lot to be said. You can read the book Fiber Menace about not eating any fiber, and that we really do not need any undigestible cellulose that's in fruit and vegetable. And maybe that's the causative issue of polyps and colon issues. And so it really came down to my own experience as I was going through it as far as, let's say, an entire year. I just said, you know what, let me see what happens. And I got blood work. Everything was perfect. I didn't have scurvy from no vitamin C, because evidently you get plenty and all you need from eating carnivore. And that it is actually from eating all the other carbs in a typical diet that then requires someone to need a higher amount of vitamin C. And yeah, there was just so much information that we were coming up with. And then the big bonus for me was when all these other medical professionals were coming on board. You have Dr. Sean Baker, an orthopedic surgeon, who was healing his patients by telling them to try this crazy carnivore thing. And they'd come back 6 months later and give them a hug and cancel their surgery. And then there was, we have Dr. Phil Ovadia, who's a heart surgeon, a cardiac surgeon. And he himself had his own why that drove him to it, as a cardiologist who was obese and trying to instruct patients how to be heart healthy. And he figured it out by turning to this whole carnivore thing and resolving his issues. And now he's very outspoken about it. He's my hero, because, for me, I'd say my issue became, as an eye doctor, and I've been an eye doctor over 32 years, I realized that this was curing people's autoimmune issues. And I'd have a patient come in with bilateral uveitis, which is a pretty serious inflammation of the eyes. And when you have it in both eyes instead of just one, it indicates a systemic issue. And I had a woman come in who had repeated episodes and blood work done and all sorts of issues. And her rheumatologist couldn't figure it out, and she was at her wit's end. And she told me, I'm ready to just do juicing. And I go, oh, whoa. that just hit a chord with me. I said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I want you to look into this and look into this and this, and start going down the rabbit hole with that. And she came back in for her follow-up, like literally 2 weeks later, for her initial follow-up off of her eye inflammation. And she had tears in her eyes. She goes, I can't even tell you how much better I feel already. And then she'd come back a month later, and she literally hugged me and was crying and said, you do not know how you changed my life. And my rheumatologist can't even believe it. And it was things like that. And then I had a patient with severe meibomian gland dysfunction, getting chalazion, all those styes, and red, irritated, and miserable. And, typical, what I'm taught to do is get out the prescription pad and write the prescription for a mild, low-grade antibiotic called doxycycline that has anti-inflammatory properties to it, and put them on this. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to tell this gentleman to try this crazy thing if he so wants, after he looks into it. And he, 6 months later, I happened to have what we call meetups. I hosted one at my home, and he replied, because he was following me on Instagram. He showed up at my door. He said, I'm down to my high school weight. I lost 40 pounds and my eyes are perfect. They've never been better. And it's just one thing after another that just kept proving to me, I'm not doing something wrong here. I'm not harming my health. If we get all the toxins out of our body, our bodies are meant to evolve. And there was just nothing that I had seen that was actually proving me wrong or making me question what I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. As a primary care physician, what I've found specifically for carnivore, and I don't tell everybody to go eat carnivore, although I certainly do not think it's an unhealthy way. It's obviously very restrictive, but specifically for people with autoimmune disease, as you mentioned, I mean, it's a game changer. And so for those that have tried other things, just can't get on top of their autoimmune disease, something like a carnivore diet is fantastic. I want to go back to the beginning quickly and ask one more question. If you said you were kind of researching this stuff, and if you would have found forums on veganism or vegetarian, which I am not a fan of, but I'm certain you could have found forums out there and people making the statement, oh, my health has gotten so much better. Did you find those? I mean, what was it about the carnivore that you're like, yeah, this is it, and not something like the veganism or something?
Yeah, I have to just think about that for a moment. Yeah, I'm going to say the issue for me with finding this was that I'm going to say fortunate for me, I didn't come across a vegan forum first because I really do not feel that is a healthy way to eat. I think that we have to, the real difficulty of this all is there's so much conflicting information. Mm-hmm. There really is. And I think the big part of why initially vegetarian and veganism is beneficial and people find benefits to a lot of things is because, well, they should be, not always do they, but they should be eliminating the same things that got eliminated from my way of eating too, which is getting rid of sugars, grains, processed food, and seed oils. To me, those are the crux of disease. Those dang seed oils that are in everything, canola oil, soybean oil, they're in everything. They're everywhere. The restaurants cook in it. Even when you think you're getting a healthy slab of a nice piece of, wild caught Alaskan salmon, they squirt that stuff in the pan and cook it in there because there's a low smoke point. It doesn't give a flavor to, because they just want them, and they want the nice sear on it. So they use it all the time. You get a nice healthy omelet, they squirt the stuff in the pan. They even deep fry bacon in that stuff in many places. And so when you come to a diet like, let's say, vegetarian or vegan, and you are then eliminating a lot of processed foods and getting healthier by eliminating, but the thing is that sugar is still part of that diet, typically gluten, grains, and all that. But depending on what version of vegetarian people do, they can reap health benefits by switching to it, but a lot of it has to do with eliminating the toxic foods. So yeah, I think that I'm fortunate that I went this route, found this first, because there are so many vegetarians and vegans that are flipping on a dime to carnivore after many years of vegetarianism, and their health eventually starts to deteriorate because it is not an optimal diet and there are missing components to it. And there's nothing healthier than protein and fat, and we need really fatty meat, and we don't need carbohydrates at all.
Yeah, agreed. So let's talk about that transition. So you found this, you kind of jumped head first, it sounds like. So what was that like for you? I mean, I'm sure you probably at least had temporarily, maybe a keto, what we call the keto flu, if you were eating all these carbohydrates. Just talk about that kind of, I know it was a long time ago for you, but talk about maybe that first week, and then obviously you began to feel good and you were sold on this, but talk about that initial.
So for me, actually, I had a fairly easy transition because I had been up to that point dabbling in and out because I was still had my issues. But with paleo, with low carb. And so I was already eliminating bread, pasta, rice. I was already, potatoes, all that kind of stuff, the starchy stuff. And so switching then was more of um, it was more of a difficulty in just things that you're used to and social issues and yeah, I think it and also just things that you really do truly love and like that as time went on, I'm realizing not so good for me. Go to a diner and get an omelet. I wanted a toast or toasted bagel with it. And just to wrap my brain around the fact that no, 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 you're not eating bread ever again. That's not good for you. And the transition was I'd say more mental. I didn't have the keto flu, but once I gave everything up, I mean, typically most people 4 to 6 weeks, they're typically in keto adapted and kind of on the road to improvements rather than dealing with some weird side effects. Some people get diarrhea. Some people get little heart palpitations. Some people get a very low dip in energy while their body switches to burning ketones instead of glucose. So yeah, my transition was pretty easy. And like you said, I had such positive, my my goal was already happening of being relieved of cravings and binging that I was so ecstatic. I said, damn, this better be healthy for me because I can't see stopping.
Okay. Well, what did your friends and family say when you told them, I'm just eating meat? I mean, you're in the medical profession, so I'm sure you had some colleagues that thought you were crazy, maybe family members too. Talk about what that experience was like.
Yeah. So the first couple of weeks, I actually didn't say anything to anybody because I was like, you know what? Let me just fly under the radar here and see how I feel and see if this really is what these people, these crazy people that I ran into on the internet are saying. And so I just decided, I'm not making any big proclamation here. Let's just eat the meat. And at the time, my husband and kids, they kind of already knew mom a lot of times didn't do the bread, didn't do the pasta or the rice. So I just made like, I don't know, I'd grill up 2 or 3 different selections of meats and I'd make them a rice and a veggie and I just didn't eat it. So that was pretty simple at the beginning for that. But then of course, yeah, it comes out and it was very, very difficult. You got to picture 14 years ago. It's not like it is now. There was no big keto movement. There was, and even now, carnivore. I go into some restaurants and I order the way I order now, and the waiter go, "Oh, are you doing that carnivore thing?" And I'd say, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I am." And so it's become more acceptable. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was. I I feel like I at least had the benefit of being a medical professional that people didn't just think I was a total wackadoodle. But there's still, I have to say, there was a lot of eyebrow raising.
Mhm.
What do you mean? How could that be healthy?
Yeah. So here you are 14 years later. You've been doing this lifestyle, which is incredible. Uh, Talk about your health now. I mean, you look great. People can't see you, but I mean, you said you're 57 or 58.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your complexion is fantastic. So just talk about kind of where you're at now, 14 years later.
Yeah. So, wow. Yeah. 14 years later, I can't even believe it. But I look back and like I said earlier, I'm so mad that I couldn't have found it earlier and missed out on a lot of suffering. But yeah, it's just so normal for me, so easy. I don't feel restricted at all. I'm never bored. People say, "Don't you get bored eating meat all the time?" I'm like, "No, no, no. You know what's boring? Boring is standing in line at the pharmacy for a prescription, and boring is sitting in the waiting room of a doctor's office. That's boring. I don't have to do that. I just eat a wide variety. I can have oxtail. I can have, you name it. But it's so simple. It's so easy. It's so beautiful. And it's not that expensive. People say, well, that's expensive. No, there's no waste. I can just change it up between ground beef and ribeyes. I find that as time has gone on, it's just so simple and easy, just sticking with the things that I love. And yeah, life has become very, very simple as far as food is concerned. And I love that. I love it.
Well, take us through a typical day, food wise. So, you may not eat, 3 meals a day, but if you do, take us through typical breakfast, lunch, and supper.
Yeah, the one thing with this way of eating that um, many transition to is, and for me, it's become this as far as eating really twice a day is all I get hungry. I don't wake up and instantly eat. I'm not hungry in the morning. So it might be 9, 10, 11 o'clock when I get the first hunger pang. So I just call it meal one and meal two. I don't call it breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And so I will, yeah, people say, well, do you eat a lot of bacon and eggs? And I'm like, no, not really. Like the night before, if I'm grilling steaks, or like I do like, I don't know, 4 or 5 New York strips at once. And I'll eat one and I'll put two in the fridge and one in the freezer. And the next morning, I just pull out, I love cold steak. I'll just eat a cold New York strip for my first meal of the day. And then when I get hungry again, it might be I make an amazing seafood bisque out of sardines and cod livers. And it sounds gross, but butter and some bacon. And I just whisk it up in 10 minutes. And then I might add in mussels and shrimp and scallops and crab meat. And I make a big batch of that. And I'll freeze little, individual containers of that. And I'll have that maybe with my pork chop or ribs or whatever meat I'm having. Because a lot of people who think about this and just start doing this, they're like, what do you have with it? What do you have on the side? And most time, I don't eat a side. I just eat meat until I'm full and I stop. And that was the other beautiful thing. I'm not counting calories. I'm not restricting myself. I eat until I'm satiated and yeah, just go about my day.
Hmm. Uh, do you cheat? I know I've had Anthony Chafee on the podcast. I mean, he's very strict. He doesn't drink coffee, doesn't do anything. And I mean, do you do anything else like drink coffee, or are you just super strict like he is?
Well, so I gave up coffee about 4 years into this, so about 10 years ago. And the reason really, wasn't me researching and deciding that this is not a health thing. I got to give it up. No, it was once I wasn't addicted to the sugar and the carbs and the processed foods and that I didn't want to be addicted to anything. And I started looking around and seeing the habits, and you get up, you feel sluggish, you got to have your coffee.
Mhm.
And I'm really, coffee is a seed, it's not a bean. It's roasted, ground up, and boiling water's poured over it. And then you're bathing your microbiome with it every day, aside from it being a psychotropic drug. And it's a pesticide. It's naturally a pesticide to ward off predators from eating it. And it's not a health food. So I'm a big proponent of trying to talk to people in my groups about that might be something potentially you want to try. And we have alternative, I talk about people ways to do that because nobody wants to give up their favorite little friend in that morning ritual. And I say, you can have hot bone broth with whisk in a tablespoon of butter. It's delicious. Or I have a hot nog drink because it's that ritual we like, the
Mhm.
warmth and all that. So, but realistically, it messes up your sleep, it messes up your hormones, your cortisol, your adrenals, your triglycerides it affects, and it's not a health food. And if you're on a mission to relieve yourself of any sort of disease and medication, you have to seriously think that man on earth, we're not intended to make coffee, go pick coffee, the
Mhm.
seeds and roast them and grind them. And it's not normal to our bodies. So yeah, I'm a pretty big proponent of trying to educate about the
Yeah.
coffee thing.
Okay. you've been doing this a long time, and so I'm sure that, you probably don't have a ton of cravings anymore. But I mean, is there something that you miss? If you go to a birthday party, you're like, man, I wish I could have that birthday cake and ice cream, or man, I'd sure love to drink a beer or have a cocktail or have a brownie, or I mean, is there anything you
Yeah.
miss?
So, like going back to your prior question about do you cheat, which is kind of like this question too, like wouldn't you kind of just cheat at a wedding and have some wedding cake, or why wouldn't you feel like you could at least have a bite of something? So, you know, cheating, it's cheating myself. And it's not that I can't have any of that. I can have it at any moment. It's that I now choose not to. It's the choice because I know better. I know what it does to me. I know, sugar feeds cancer cells. So why would I put sugar in my body? I know it's inflammatory. So why would I put it in my body? It becomes a choice, and it becomes very empowering to say, it's not that I can't have it. I really don't want to put that in my body. So therein lies where the mindset has to change, because we need to change our relationship with food, because food has become such an entertaining event. Everything surrounding it's food. Where are we going? What are we eating? What are you bringing? Everything. And so, and then aside from that, we have a lifelong history where we turn to food either out of stress, boredom, anxiety, anger. We use food to fill an emotional void, to console ourselves. So that's a whole different entity, and in like that's a whole other issue that needs to be talked about with this, because some people will say, "Oh, I tried it, but I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it." Well, you know why? That little ditch demon in your head wanted to get the dopamine hit, wanted to get you right back to where you were eating your favorite foods. And you have to think long and hard about, were you convincing yourself you can't do it? Because this is ancestrally man hunted animals and ate fatty meat and organs.
Well, let's quickly go through some myths here. So if people are unfamiliar with the carnivore diet, they haven't heard some of my previous podcasts, they may be thinking some of these things. And so uh, one myth is, okay, all this red meat is bad for you, it's going to cause cancer. What would you say to
Yeah,
that?
that's going to be a myth that goes down as one of the biggest misconceptions of all time. If that were the case, then man, for all this time, who's out there hunting and eating fatty red meat, would be extinct from heart disease. There would be no cardiologist like Dr. Ovadia, who's not going to risk his own heart health, right? So I kind of throw back. I actually just did a YouTube video that was called "What to Say to the Naysayers," because these are such common topics that have come up over the years, over and over again, and legitimately so. Why? Because everybody has been in that same position of being brainwashed, of hearing from the media that we need to eat lots of fruits and vegetables. Oh, and guess what? You need to eat lean meat and fish. Oh, on top of that, let's do a meatless Monday too. It's the opposite. I start telling people, I just do the opposite of what they, quote unquote, tell me. I don't put sunscreen on. I spend a lot of time out in the sun. It's really important for our skin and to get in our eyes. I don't wear sunglasses all the time. I'm probably one of the very few eye doctors that will talk about how our eye is connected to the brain. And when you put sunglasses on, it sort of tricks your brain into thinking it's nighttime, and it changes your hormones and does all sorts of things. And granted, there's time and place to have sunglasses on when you're on the water or the snow or the beach. I'm not stupid. And I wear it in the car because the windshield blocks the sun rays anyway. But there's so much to be said for doing your own research, becoming your own health advocate. And that's why when I saw what your podcast was all about, I was pretty excited to know that there's somebody else out here who is sick and tired of this sick care system that we
For
have
sure.
out here. And
Yeah.
this is not about health. This is about pharmaceutical companies making trillions of dollars, and the
Mhm.
healthcare industry making trillions of dollars off of all these people. They're not telling diabetics it's reversible. Type 2 diabetes is completely reversible. They want everybody to keep taking their, metformin
Yeah.
and their drugs.
100%. So you mentioned the fruits and vegetables, and that was the other myth that I was going to ask about. But when people say, well, you have to have the fruits and vegetables for the fiber, for the antioxidants, and stuff like that. What do you say to that?
Yeah, so I keep an actual whole little note on my iPad that has links to all sorts of scientists and physicians, with different blog posts, different YouTube videos, explaining why vegetables are really not all that healthy for us, and that they have anti-nutrients, they have phytates, oxalates, things in them to protect them to stay on this earth, and especially in the leaves where a predator would come up and eat. There's so much oxalates in spinach, and I tell people, yeah, spinach really isn't healthy, and they're like, what? I juice them all the time. Kale, not so healthy. Go on YouTube and watch Dr. Paul Saladino talk about, that kind of thing. And just start educating yourself from the grassroots, ground up, because nobody out there in the media is going to have any word about it not being healthy. Nobody.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then I guess my last kind of question on that, I'm sure you're probably familiar with Walter Longo, who's done a lot of longevity studies, and he talks about kind of protein sparing diets, and so what's your thought on that as far as this higher protein, that not as much as like a carnivore, but in the Western culture, we eat a lot of high protein, but that's going to decrease longevity, and decreasing protein is going to improve longevity. What's your thought on all that?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one because we can't really project longevity. I'm expecting to be climbing mountains well into my 90s, and beyond, hopefully, if what I believe actually comes to be true. But yeah, I really believe that I don't need to eat blueberries to live longer. I don't need to seek out antioxidants and eat them on a daily basis, because you know what? There's a lot of areas where primitive populations, the Eskimos, they didn't have access to any vegetation. And for the most part, these primitive societies only have access to what little vegetation is available in season. And you're not eating the fruit we have now is so genetically modified to be sugar bombs. The fruit back then was tart cherries, crab apples, seeded bananas. Like it's not recognizable as what we have now, which literally they have grapes now called cotton candy grapes. They have a variety. And I just, if I truly believed that I was shortening my life by eating too much protein, I have to say that, maybe I would increase my fat and decrease my protein, and do more of a ketogenic, where you do like 80 to 90% of your calories from fat and 10 to 20% from protein. But as of now, I feel so good. My health is perfect. My blood work is perfect, that I just don't see any reason to change. I mean, my mom's had breast cancer, double mastectomy. My dad had melanoma, obese, diabetic, Parkinson's, stroke, all this stuff. I've watched, and my dad passed recently, and I watched the deterioration, and it's not genetic. You know what I witnessed and realized is, my dad had a love of, I'd see how much mayonnaise and salad dressing and, whatever, the standard, I call it instead of SAD being standard American diet, I call it the standard atrocious diet. But we certainly had roast beef and carrots and mashed potatoes on Sunday night. It wasn't like, but we had Entenmann's crumb cake. We had, whatever, the typical stuff. But I grew up and saw what happened to the health of my parents. They unfortunately didn't want to listen to their daughter
Hmm.
when but my brother, who's a type 1 diabetic, he did start paying attention and has been having very positive benefits from switching over. But yeah, it's really it's so tough. And I tell you, you can I say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them carnivore. Each person has to have their own motivating reason to want to do this.
Okay. Well, very nice. Uh, well, let's talk about how people can get a hold of you. So your website is carnivore-doctor.com. Is
Carnivore
that
hyphen, I guess they
hyphen? Yeah, I
call it
said dash, but
doctor.
yeah,
Yeah.
carnivore-doctor.com. Is that usually the best way for people to get up with you?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm mainly on Instagram and YouTube.
Okay.
I do a lot of different videos. I'll do question and answer sessions. I go live every Tuesday night on YouTube, and I just try to make myself accessible for anybody who has questions and who is attempting to come into this very extraordinarily different way of eating, but so empowering and impactful to people's health that I'm just so excited to keep spreading the word.
Yeah. And you mentioned briefly you also do these meetups, MEAT ups. Talk about what that is about.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, back when I started this, Charles Washington had the one of the original ones. He just said, "Hey, I'm going to be running a half marathon in Philly. Anybody want to come eat?" And we typically go to churrascarias, the Brazilian steakhouses, where they come around and just keep slicing off the meat for you. And um, I walked away from that feeling so empowered and so motivated to be around people who I felt normal, and they were eating the same way I did for all different reasons, but all of us with amazing outcomes. So just as time went on, I just started doing it myself now in the past 3 years since I kind of came out and made my Instagram and YouTube out there. And I just decided that I want to be able to join people together. So every year here in New Jersey, I have what's called the Northeast Meetup. It's now up to, I had to 125 people. I had to cut it off. And I'm attempting now to do a meetup in every state. And basically I just announced, and I actually just got the domain carnivoremeetup.com. So I'm going to make a website and have a universal spot where anybody who is hosting meetups can post, and then anybody can try to find one local to them. Because once you gather with people and they're local, and maybe once a month you get together and have discussions, and it's just really community and support is so important in this, because you could feel mighty alone, very, very isolated when you are not joining into the the mountains of horrible food that so many people are eating around you.
Yeah. Well, very nice. Well, as we wrap up here, I always ask my guest if they could give us one health tip that would make us healthier today. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but what would you say to that?
No, maybe you don't, because my main thing right now is to say, because I really do believe, even if you don't turn to carnivore because it's just too crazy and too, you can't wrap your brain around that. But the one thing that I say is avoid seed oils like the plague.
Mm-hmm.
Like the plague, because it's so insidious. It really has such a long half-life. It stays in your body about 6 to 8 years, even after just eating a single side of French fries at a restaurant. This stuff embeds and is inflammatory, and I feel is very, very much a significant cause of disease. And I'm on a mission just because of macular degeneration, which my dad also had. And I interviewed Dr. Chris Kenobi, an ophthalmologist who dedicated really his whole career now. He left practice because of really trying to get the message out about seed oils, and not just macular degeneration, but every disease. And yeah, so that would be the one thing that I think I would say as a health tip.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. It's definitely terrible for you. Um, well, very nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and it was fun just to hear your story, and just motivational. And um, anything else you want to throw out there or that I didn't ask before we close up?
Um, no, I think that's it. I am one who I just feel if anybody has questions or anybody is, seriously thinking that they want to give it a go, that, reach out. I'm here and I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Excuse me, Dr. Lisa Wiedeman. Appreciate your time, and I appreciate everyone listening as always. And we will talk to you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Fit RX. I invite you to share this with friends and family. If you would like, you can check out our website at vibrantlifedc.com, or you can email me at drgreg@vibrantlifedc.com.